The movie that I chose to analyze for its ethical attributes was The Shawshank
Redemption.
Starting with a brief plot overview, we first see our main character, Andy Dufresne, be wrongly accused of murdering his wife. He soon is sent to trial for this crime, and he's found guilty of murder on the first degree, and he's forced to serve a life sentence at Shawshank Penitentiary. During his stay here, he faces all kinds of abuse, and he very soon learns the inner workings of the prison, which include corruptness from the warden and the chief guard. He also befriends another criminal, Red, who becomes another main character, who mentors Andy during his stay and helps him to avoid trouble. Some of the ethical dilemmas that are presented are the overall corrupt nature of the prison. This includes various types of abuse, which are physical, mental, and verbal. An example of some of the mental abuse that happens is the prisoner's stay in solitary confinement. Our main character, Andy, experiences this, and he's forced to stay there after speaking out against the injustice of the prison for weeks and weeks until he slowly drives himself crazy before he finally is able to get out. There are ways to avoid this abuse, which largely comes from special treatment from the warden and the chief guard. This involves doing illegal favors for them that are against the prisoner's will. In Andy's case, he has to do taxes for the warden under the table, and he also helps them to embezzle money against his will. The warden brings up many ethical dilemmas throughout the storyline. He says he believes in two things, discipline and the Bible, but he mostly exercises the discipline aspect of this mentality. He is consumed by greed, and he's the main antagonist and causes many problems for Andy and Red throughout the story. The chief guard is another antagonist who uses brutality and violence to instill fear in all of the prisoners. But perhaps the biggest ethical dilemma of the entire plot is the fact that there's an innocent man in prison, and each time he attempts to reveal his innocence, he is shot down by the warden or the chief guard. Some of the ethical theories at play are the deontological perspective. Inmates here are treated as a means to an end, which obviously goes against this mindset, and they're forced to do the warden's dirty work, and they lack basic human dignity. When we also look at it from the perspective of egoism, this largely revolves around the warden, who seeks power and profit and only wants to satiate his own long-term interests, and he's ultimately a very egotistical character. However, our main character, Andy, embodies virtue-based ethics. Andy is someone who realizes his past mistakes and genuinely wants to improve his quality of life and the quality of life for all of the inmates at Shawshank. He embodies selflessness, hope, compassion, and fairness, which are all a part of virtue-based ethics, and he practices these all daily. For a brief character analysis, we begin with Andy at the beginning of the story. Here he is at the beginning, fearful, hopeless, and he desperately clings to any control he can get, which is obviously very difficult to have in prison. He has very little control over his circumstances or any of the things that happen to him, but still he grasps at this. Similar to Andy, Red is bitter, he's close-minded, and he's very afraid of change, and he sees hope as a dangerous thing. He's afraid of hope because time and time again, his hope is crushed after multiple parole meetings, where it just ultimately results in him having to return to his cell, and he eventually loses hope at the idea that he will ever get out of prison. However, as the plot develops, we see character development from both Andy and Red. Starting with Andy, we see that Andy begins to discover what is truly valuable in life again. He tells Red that there's the option of get busy living or get busy dying. And he truly tries to embody this as he goes about his life in the prison, and he realizes that there's immense power and hope, and he clings to this throughout the rest of the story. Andy embodies this hope through attempting to improve the prison by whatever means possible. He does this through the development of educational services, mentoring young inmates, and he even begins working for the warden, which returns him to a sense of normalcy and what his life used to be like before he was in prison, and he truly believes that even though he is in prison, there's a difference to be made. However, Andy's final straw comes when another prisoner is wrongfully shot after revealing information that could have set Andy free. Moving on to the character development of Red, Red used to be a slave to the legal system, but finally he is able to adopt Andy's message of hope, and he clings to this as well and lets it motivate him throughout the duration of the story. We clearly see this during his final parole meeting, where it's revealed that he has adopted a new mindset. Finally, at this parole meeting, he speaks out against the injustice he believes he has experienced, and he tells the lawyer that is interviewing him that there is no such thing as rehabilitation. He says that this is simply a word that has been made up by the prison to keep him as an enslaved man, and always imprisoned, and rehabilitation is simply something that does not exist. Instead, he gives them a very convincing speech about he is truly a changed man and he wants to see a change in his circumstance and a change in the prison. And once he finally speaks out against these things, he leaves the prison as a free man.
The next morning, right about the time Raquel was spilling her little secret, a man nobody ever laid eyes on before strolled into the Maine National Bank. Until that moment, he didn't exist, except on paper.
May I help you?
He had all the proper ID, driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, and the signature was a spot-on match.
I must say, I'm sorry to be losing your business. I hope you'll enjoy living abroad. Thank you. I'm sure I will.
Here's your cashier's check, sir. Would there be anything else?
Please, could you add this to your outgoing mail?
I'd be happy to.
Good day, sir. Good day.
Mr. Stevens visited nearly a dozen banks in the Portland area that morning. All told, he blew town with better than $370,000 of Warden Norton's money. Severance pay for 19 years.
Good morning, Portland Daily Bugle.
As we can see from this clip, justice is finally served. When this clip is played, Andy and Red at this time are free men. Andy has successfully escaped from prison, and Red has passed his parole meeting and now he's free, so both of these truly changed men are finally to see justice served because they're out of Shawshank Penitentiary. And how this was all able to come together, Andy left the police evidence after he escaped that showed the abuse and embezzlement that took place in Shawshank Penitentiary. When we look at this from a utilitarian perspective again, justice is definitely served because now the prisoners collectively will receive much better treatment under new authority from a new warden and a new guard. Deontological justice is also served because Andy and Red are now free to dictate their own happiness through autonomy and self-determination. Now the prisoners will truly be respected instead of being treated as a means to an end.